Good evening and welcome everyone. This is an open meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. I'm Joshua Levy, Committee Chair. It's Wednesday, December 19th, 2022, and the meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless the law requires it. This meeting will not have public comment except in connection with the first item of business, citizen request to address the Finance Committee. First, I will confirm that a quorum of the members of the Finance Committee are present. When I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Rick.
Here.
Dick.
Here.
Carol.
Sorry, here.
No worries. John.
I'm here.
Jim.
Here.
And Louise.
Here.
Okay. And the chair is here as well. As a preliminary matter, I would ask for a vote to continue the meeting to January 26th, 2022 in the event of a technical disruption this evening.
So moved.
Second.
We'll take a roll call. Rick,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
And right now we're voting to continue the meeting to January 26th in the event of a disruption. Barry.
Here. Yes.
And Tom.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, so the first item of business is citizen request to address the Finance Committee. If there's any resident who wishes to address the Finance Committee, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom to indicate that you would like to speak. If you're on the telephone, you can also press *9. I don't see anyone at the moment raising their hands. We'll give them a couple minutes, and in the meantime, we can move to approval of the minutes of prior meeting, January 12th, 2022. Those were circulated. Does anyone have any comments?
I move their approval. We had, Louise and I made a couple of spelling mistakes. There was a hiccup on Dan Gudikant's name first time through. Gudikant's.
Glad we got that. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call. Rick,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. I still don't see anyone raising their hand, so we'll move on to the next item of business, the public budget hearing on the Building Design and Construction Department. Dave, would you bring Hank Half in? And as he's coming in,
Catherine Copley is with him.
and Catherine, yes, thank you.
Okay, I will start. I have this as one of my, I'm the liaison to building design and construction. I met through Zoom yesterday with Hank and Catherine and Dave Davison, and we reviewed their budget request, which is in section 12 of your binder. I would say that this one is relatively straightforward. And I want to start by first congratulating Hank on becoming the new head of this group, taking over for Steve Popper, who retired after, I believe it was 18 years of wonderful service and dedicated service in that position. And Hank is the new director. And so I wanted to congratulate Hank on that achievement. I look forward to continuing to work with you in that capacity. The budget for next year carries 3 full-time equivalents, which is Hank as the head of the department, and then Ken Sargent, who is a senior project manager, and then Catherine, who does all the administrative work for the group. The projects during fiscal year 23 will consist of wrapping up any last details for the public safety project. That will be the physical construction is finishing as we speak downtown with the police part of the fire and public safety building, and then finishing whatever needs to be cleaned up at Hillside for the people who will be moving out of there, primarily the police. And then the additional work will be on the Emery Grover Hillside project with an expected town meeting vote in May for construction funds, both for renovation work to be done at Hillside to accommodate the school administration folks who will be transferring over there, and then for the gutting and renovation of Emery Grover. And that will be the primary work of this group during the fiscal year 23, which will include completing the design, having the physical work be done at Hillside, the move into Hillside, and then the physical work beginning with Emery Grover. They'll be supporting other endeavors that take place during the year. One will be next summer, the demolition of the buildings up at Ridge Hill. And then there could be two possible capital projects, one for Paula's School locker, and then for replacement of the RTUs, rooftop units at the Elliott and Broad Meadow schools. So that's will be what their plate will be. And I guess the last part of it would be continuation of the school master plan, which will be rolled out and presented for discussions amongst the many constituencies in the town regarding it. And that will take place during the fiscal year as well. So I think that's an overview. And if Hank and Catherine are here, if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, John. Anything to add, Hank?
No, that was an excellent summary, John. Thank you.
Perfect. Dick, do you have a question?
Yeah, and sometimes in the past, costs such as this have been built into the capital structure of the specific projects. What are the considerations with respect to that going forward?
We have just recently hired Hill International for on-call PM services, project management services, primarily focusing on their cost estimating capabilities, because we have to produce a second cost estimate for each project and then reconcile the differences between the two cost estimates that prepared by the designer and the OPM. We're focusing first on the monies previously appropriated to support that effort. And there will be some time that is attributed to the project, some portion of our time attributed to the project moving forward. But we also take on, as part of our expenses, a variety of the other miscellaneous things, such as some of the commissioning and testing. And so last year, I think there was about a third of the time that was charged to various projects. And Ken Sargent, as you know, was on a prior special authorization for the public safety building. But with Steve's retirement, Ken basically moved into my position, and Mike Retzky, who was previously with the department, is now the superintendent of sewer and water. And Steve Gentile, who was previously with our department, had moved on to building maintenance department and has subsequently taken on a job elsewhere. So we're down to 3, and we will charge time to various projects as appropriate.
I guess my question really was, what are the implications? Are there any significant cost savings or benefits having them charged to the project versus being part of the general budget, if you will, of the basic town budget?
I defer to Dave.
Good, Dave.
Our practice has been to appropriate the salaries and the operating budgets, because at the beginning of in any fiscal year, you don't know what portion of the time is allowable to be charged to a project. In smaller projects, there usually isn't an accommodation for the project manager cost, but any time that is chargeable to a capital project is transferred to the project, And then the operating budget has a turn back at the end of the fiscal year. And
And
that's
what,
something that's in practice for years. That's been the practice for years.
what's the benefit of doing it that way?
Well, we have an obligation to pay the people whether there's a sufficient
Yeah.
appropriation in the capital budget. So that's the purpose that we do it the way that we do.
No, but I mean, obviously, it doesn't save, does it save us money one way or the other as to where it lies?
No.
I wouldn't think so, yeah.
Pay the same
No, I
amount.
mean, the town's paying it in either case, it's just
Yeah.
whether it's in one bucket or the other bucket.
Precisely, yeah.
Gotcha.
Go ahead, Rick.
Chair. Hank, congratulations.
Thank you.
Based on your presentation last night with school board, given whatever methodology they choose, what project goes first and the like, I saw in your write-up here that obviously that's going to require more resources once that takes place. Have you had a chance to begin to think about, depending what course they take, what that does to your overall cost?
A little bit, because the discussion will probably take a full year before a preferred direction is settled upon. And then if a statement of interest is filed with the Mass School Building Authority, that can take another year for approval. That's one of those heavy lift projects that we do that doesn't have any other funding source other than our salary in this appropriation. So I think that probably by the time we get to FY24, we would be looking to supplement our staff. The flexibility that having an on-call OPM gives us, similar to what happened with Sunita Williams, we were able to pull individuals from the on-call PM to supplement our forces as needed. And in that case, particularly, we had 2 people from Daedalus Projects who helped us on site. And we did the same at the high school edition. So we have that flexibility built in. It's a 3-year contract with them. And I think by the time we get through this year into FY24, we'll make a reassessment once we know what the school master plan entails.
Thank you.
Louise, did you have a question?
I do. So I have a question. In the write-up, it states that a member of the department will provide staff support to the new Climate Action Plan Committee. So what is it that the department's doing for that committee?
Yeah, go ahead, Hank. Oh, you're
I'm
the
the
person.
I'm the person working with Cecilia, and it's a role hopefully not as demanding as the Solar Energy Exploratory Committee. It's, I think, targeted to be a 1-year process to develop a climate action plan, and then a series of recommendations will be coming out of that. The members haven't been, to the best of my knowledge, haven't been fully appointed as of yet. I think there are 9 members who will be part of the committee, and it would likely involve, I would think, at least monthly meetings, and then various assignments to support them. We as a group, there's a group within the town who's very interested, who are very interested in sustainability. And so we've put together some working papers to offer up to the town manager, but it'll be the committee that sets the agenda.
I have a question about ventilation. That's been a hot topic recently because of the pandemic, including for new buildings like Sunita Williams. So I'm curious what the process is that building design and construction uses to review decisions pertaining to the HVAC systems that are installed in new buildings.
A very extensive system. We rely on the design team and their expertise. Obviously, they have to design to code, but projects like Sunita that you brought up, we also had enhancements to the code in order to meet the LEED Silver requirements. All of these buildings are very technologically advanced. The control systems are very different from the control systems that are in buildings that are even just 10 years old. So that complexity offers great advantages in terms of energy savings and utilizing the most efficient equipment. Barry DuLong now sits in on all of our PPBC meetings, and we've organized monthly coordination meetings with them, trying to iron out some of the transition problems between construction and operations, and also to make sure that he has a voice as we're going through the design of the systems. So that hopefully will improve, but mechanical systems are probably the most complicated part of any building.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear that we are continuing to pay attention to it. It's just disappointing to hear from some people, like we've heard from the school department that even Sunita Williams sometimes doesn't work as it's expected to. And so just as we're building new buildings, I would hope that the HVAC systems we use or choose to use are able to be easily implemented. I mean, they can be state of the art and they can be complicated, but they also have to function reliably.
Yes, and we're not the only district that has experienced this. In fact, the MSBA is investigating a 2-year recommissioning of projects because they have found similar issues in other districts. And we also have an on-call commissioning agent who helped us immensely during the COVID era. Initially, we had done the procurement for those services, and then the building maintenance department has also actually now probably used them almost more than we have as they're going through the recommissioning of the various buildings. And hopefully with the new more standardized maintenance that they're incorporating into their program, some of those concerns will be corrected, and we will catch things earlier in the design phase. But a secondary, a 2-year recommissioning is something we're discussing with the building maintenance department.
Thanks, Hank. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Hank. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
The next budget hearing is for the fire department. If you, Dave, please bring in Chief Condon. And I think Rick has an introduction.
I do.
So I need to recuse myself from this discussion as my son is a firefighter. So I will be offline, and if I may ask that someone text me when the discussion is over and I can come back in.
Perfect. Thanks, Louise. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
Hey, Chief.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow members. Josh and I met with the chief a few weeks ago, and I'm happy to introduce this proposed 23 operating budget. There are lots of moving pieces, but it's a relatively straightforward budget with the proposed increase commensurate with maintaining year-over-year service delivery levels. In FY21, the department generated a total of $1,108,069 from ambulance runs, prevention inspections, and alarm permits. Overall, this is down $43,002 from FY20, due in part to COVID-19. In conjunction with this core mission, namely public safety, the department generates with its 80 staff members, 2 ladder trucks, 3 engines, 3 ambulances, 1 brush truck, 1 fire alarm truck, 1 bucket pickup truck, and an all-terrain vehicle. And they're all located out of brand new Station 1 and brand new Station 2. The department responded to approximately 3,775 calls in FY21, with, as typical, 51.5% of these calls all EMS runs. Ambulance runs in FY19 were 2,084, in 2020 were 1,996, and in 2021 were 1,923, reflective of COVID. The new ambulance runs out of Station 2 represent about 40% of the total number of runs, with an overall positive impact to response time due to an ambulance now in both stations. And we've talked about that for a long time. Currently, there are 4 vacant positions in the department, 2 positions scheduled to graduate from the academy in 1/28/22, 1 position scheduled to graduate in June of this year, and 1 position is yet to be hired. Currently, there are 5 positions at their longevity maximum, with another 9 in FY23 to reach their longevity maximum. The SAFER grant has expired. The portion of the compensation for the 8 newly hired firefighters, originally covered in part by this grant, is now included in its total in FY23 salary line. Service delivery efficiencies gained by the new positions: 1 full-time ALS ambulance at both Station 1 and 2, appropriate number of personnel at a fire scene, improving effectiveness in fighting that fire, and certainly safety for the firefighters. The firefighters are divided into 4 units, 3 units with 17 firefighters and 1 unit with 16 firefighters. However, each unit is populated on average between 14 or 15 firefighters. If staffing levels drop below 13 firefighters per shift, 1 ladder truck and 1 ambulance is removed from service due to lack of personnel. In prior years, the situation occurred throughout the year, and on average, this occurrence was equivalent to about 10 days per month. Currently, with a full complement of firefighters, taking equipment out of service due to low staffing levels no longer occurs. In order to maintain the appropriate service delivery staffing levels due to earned accrued vacation, personal time, callbacks, and the like, as you can see, $1,365,001 is proposed. This is up $171,000 from FY22, due in part to COVID-19 related sick time and the 8 new positions. What the department did to project what all this would be is they took expenses of all these line items, and they projected what that cost would be with COVID expenses and what those costs would be without COVID expenses, and they split the difference for a projected number. If obviously COVID is less impactful, that number will go down. Currently, the collective bargaining agreement has expired for both units. The proposed FY23 salary and wage line item, up 4.7%, is inclusive of current step and longevity increases only. $252,135, or 68% of that overall projected increase to this line item, is due to the 8 new firefighters who are no longer covered by the SAFER grant. The fuel line continues to be split from vehicle to supplies and reflects an increase over FY21 of $9,902. Utilization is based on a 3-year consumption average of unleaded at 6,551 gallons and diesel at 6,342 gallons, with $3.67 up $1.22 per gallon for gasoline and $3.60 up 72 cents per gallon for diesel from the prior year. There's 1 DSR4, and that's $20,000 for a yearly subscription for enhanced record management software. The request is not meant to replace the CAD incident reporting software currently in service, as the chief told Josh and I, but will be integrated into it. In addition, the current CAD system is primarily a police application, and the vendor has announced it will not be enhancing the fire side of their application in the future. From the fire service perspective, this new management software will provide real-time integration of data in the field, i.e. building floor plans and the like, with fire personnel in the field. This level of information is lacking in the current CAD application, not to mention increased safety for all fire personnel when responding to calls. Budgeted capital, $35,334 referenced in section DSR 2C represents the expense for personal protective structure firefighting gear due to promotions and new hires. In conclusion, absent a collective bargaining agreement, which when signed will undoubtedly increase the department's overall cost, as presented here with the CFR grant no longer in place, the FY23 proposed base budget of $9,864,326 represents an overall increase of $450,861 or 4.8% over FY22. With the proposed DSR 4, the overall increase of $470,861 will represent 5% over FY22. Mr. Chairman, I would like to invite the chief to kick in and the committee to ask any questions they would like. Thank you, Mr.
Rick.
Chair.
Thank you, Rick. Chief, do you have anything to add?
I think Rick did a fabulous job in explaining our situation. The only thing I would add is a great thank you from our department to the committee for their support over building projects the last couple of years, and in the town in general for the overall support they've given the fire department for many years. But other
That's
than
great.
that, I think Rick did a great explanation.
It's great to see both buildings up and running now.
Yes.
Any questions?
Josh,
ahead,
I don't
Dick.
think there was enough detail from Rick Bonet.
We like specifics.
I'll try harder next time.
Go into
Go ahead, Dick.
subsection 4B and then we'll be all set.
Go
Great
ahead,
job.
Dick.
Great job.
Dick, go ahead.
Rick, I'm sorry to bring this up because you and I have talked about this, but I'm just a little confused. The salary and wage line is up to regular wage is up 267,000. But the overtime is up 172, and that I don't understand the ratio between those two numbers. How can the overtime be up that much more when the base salary is not up? And I assume, and as you mentioned, the 8 new firefighters are in the regular wage line. So I don't understand the discrepancy.
Chief, do I take that?
If you want to, or I can.
Yeah, you go ahead and then I'll jump in.
I think one of the things for the committee to remember is as all these new firefighters gain in seniority, their vacations move up and those are covered with overtime. The other thing was, as Rick pointed out, the COVID costs, we really don't know what's going to happen. So we tried to project as best we could, and that added to the overtime as well.
Plus, Dick, as I said before, they're without a contract really. And so in essence, it's longevity and step. And so all the other stuff that you would think would be normally in there is not. So that also adds to the discrepancy a little bit.
But wouldn't that apply equally to the base regular wage as the overtime? Shouldn't they be up in tandem? Whereas they seem to be out of proportion to each other. That's my only confusion. I'm not challenging. I just don't, if someone asked me to explain it, I couldn't.
Okay. Chief, I'll throw it back to you again.
Yeah, I think it's just that as I was trying to say, they accrue more time, and over the years, we have our department, over half of the personnel is still within the step schedules. So as they move up and they aren't at maximum vacation time, so they're moving through that. So I think that's at one point takes a little bit of a lead over the salaries, and as Rick said, they are without contracts, so that is part of it too. We use pretty much the same matrix that we've always used for the overtime, except for we had to take in consideration COVID. Early on, COVID, a lot of it was reimbursed by the federal government, and currently this year by the state government, some of it is being reimbursed. So what our costs will be going forward, we really don't know. We hope that COVID ends up being a zero cost in FY23, but it's difficult for us to forecast that.
Anyone else have any questions they want to ask?
I
ahead.
had one question on the DSR4. I guess this may be two. Is this a one-time expense, or are we expecting it to be every year? Is the first question. And then two, 20,000 seems like almost too much of a rounded number, and also seems a little high for a software subscription. So I was wondering if I could have those questions addressed, please.
So we aren't sure what the actual number will be. It is most of the software now is cloud-based, so it's annual costs. One of the ones that we're looking at would integrate with our EMS software, as well as the current dispatch software that we're piggybacking off the police uses. When the software is done on an annual basis, the vendors tend to keep up with changes. And so that's one of the things. The one we're looking at, if we were to integrate it with our fire software, we got a quote of, I believe it was around $17,000. So we just put it at 20. We really don't know until we investigate all the options out there, what it's going to be.
Go ahead, Jim.
Chief, great to see you. This is a very, very small question, but we heard a couple weeks ago that there was a sum of money that was being requested to clean the firehouse. And we've heard from other people that in fact, pretty much all of your firefighters clean the firehouse. So do you have any information for us as to whether or not you guys and gals need more money in order to clean your premises?
So the firefighters clean the living areas that they're in. They take care of the apparatus floor and that sort of thing. The public areas, the administrative areas, they do not. They're custodians for that. Being a brand new building, it would make sense not to let things get, what's the word I'm looking for, out of sync as far as maintenance goes. And the custodians are the ones who have the equipment, the knowledge, and the understanding of what to do and when to do it. So both buildings need some work. Most of it would be at headquarters, but Station 2, there's a substantial lobby area that sort of needs to be taken care of. And then, ongoing, once a month kind of things, I think the custodians would do a better job than the firefighters trying to fit it in between calls. But as far as the living area goes, they do take care of that.
Is this more COVID related or just regular maintenance related?
It's not COVID related. I think it would be regular upkeep.
So it's my point is, this is something that's not going to end after a year or two, God willing. You're thinking it's going to, as long as we have the buildings, we're going to want to have those maintenance costs.
Correct, but I don't think we have that in our budget.
No. The reason I'm asking you is because I think you'll tell me the truth.
Jimmy, you don't know me long enough.
No, the problem is I do know you long enough.
You do. That's true. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions? I guess I had just curious, out of curiosity, the emergency management position, at one point it was split between fire and health and human services. Is that still the case?
That's within our budget now.
All within fire.
Yes.
So I guess, how has that position functioned during COVID? Has it been different than it was originally envisioned?
Not different than it was envisioned, but it was certainly different than expected. We were expecting to do a lot more preparation type of drills and trainings for the town's employees. And in reality, we were thrown into the fire quickly to do it real time. And so the position is been very effective with that, and they work closely with Health and Human Services as well, even though it's in our budget. It's really sort of like a quasi department position.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen the benefits of having that position. I think the town has, I mean, despite the difficulties, done a great job in managing the crisis.
Yeah, I would agree. The town is been outstanding during this pandemic and hopefully soon endemic. And I would attribute an awful lot of that to the coordination done by the emergency management position. Without that position, there would have been a lot of people trying to juggle thoughts and ideas with their own department issues.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Anyone else from the committee have any comments? Okay. Thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a happy new year.
Thank you, Chief.
Have a great night.
Bye now.
Thanks, Chief.
Next is Health and Human Services. Dave, would you please bring Tim McDonald on? And Tom has an introduction.
Someone going to text Louise.
Oh, yeah. She's back.
Waiting for Tim to show his pretty face. You there, Tim? They're in mute, so.
Yes,
There you
here's my pretty face, Tom.
I guess you heard me. So I just want to say welcome to Tim, and also first and foremost, congratulate Tim on becoming a father last fall. His son is about 2.5 months old. His name is Nathaniel. Congratulations, Tim.
Thanks.
Tim is just returning from paternity leave. And I actually knew he was back because I saw his face on local news when they were talking about our local COVID testing site. So that's how he knew he was back. Anyway, I wanted to also thank Tim and his staff for a remarkable response to the pandemic. They've been quite busy pivoting during this time. They've held several clinics for vaccines. They've increased their communications to the town with regard to the pandemic. They've done contact tracing, have some epidemiology help going on. Mental health services has exploded, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There's lots of other things done. So thanks, Tim, for all the work that you and your staff has done. Turning to the budget, for those of you who may have noticed, is relatively flat. There's about a 2% increase. Most of that is in salaries increase, regular raises. Most of and there are no DSR 4s as well. Most of our conversation really revolved around ARPA funds and other grants that the Health and Human Services Division has been using to address the issues in the pandemic. And Tim will spend some time discussing what those funds are, answer questions with regard to that, how much we've spent, and also give us some insight into his perspective on what of those expenses, which are currently outside his budget, but being paid for by grants and ARPA money, that he may see as becoming a permanent part of his department. So with that, I will turn it over to Tim.
Thanks very much, Tom. I'm glad to be here. Certainly it's not fun to still be in the pandemic, but we have a very hardworking team across the different Health and Human Services divisions. We're in a different place certainly than we were last year. The senior center is back open. There's still some participants who aren't willing or interested in coming in person, but we have a substantial amount of remote programming that's available for them, as well as the in-person programming. We do, as you mentioned, have a substantial increase in the caseload for the Youth and Family Services Division. That shouldn't be a surprise. I think people probably have seen the headlines about sort of the youth mental health crisis and the impact of not having access to school over the course of the year, having limited access to school over the course of the year. The Public Health Division is still very much involved in the day-to-day COVID response. We do work closely, and I was here just a little bit earlier when you asked Chief Condon about emergency management. We do work closely with emergency management, especially getting their help with managing logistics of clinics and logistics of personal protective equipment orders. We have run a significant number of vaccination clinics. We've done, I forget off the top of my head, 10,000 or so, 10,000 vaccinations in 1 year and 1 week. So since January 11th, 2021 is when we started in earnest with first responder vaccinations for COVID. It feels both like quite a long time ago and also relatively recent. That is certainly a lot busier than our normal pace of vaccinations would be in a typical year. We are still very much involved in contact tracing, although contact tracing is changing very rapidly. The State Department of Public Health, the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education are changing requirements and expectations around contact tracing very frequently. They made changes, substantial changes in August, October, and December, and this week. So that's certainly something that we keep an eye on, and a number of our part-time staff are focused in that area. I did provide Tom, probably only a few minutes before I signed on, a list of the different grants that the Department of Health and Human Services has received to respond to COVID-19. Most of those have been in the Public Health Division. ARPA funds have been requested by Public Health and the Youth and Family Services Division, and those were approved by the Select Board. So the grants we received were generally smaller dollar grants, 20,000 here, 15,000 there, whereas certainly the ARPA funding was a substantial commitment. ARPA funding was approved in the fall, maybe it was late summer, early fall, for public health, focusing on providing part-time contact tracers, a full-time public health nurse, and a full-time epidemiologist. I think that those positions have been very valuable. Tom, you asked me, what I think long-term might be the needs, and I think I don't want to fully answer that question. I think the data analysis functions that the epidemiologist has provided are really quite valuable, and I want to figure out how to continue to provide those in some form or another, whether that is realistic to have a full-time data analysis person in Health and Human Services, or whether there's an ability to create some of that, a function that covers some of those aspects. That's certainly something I'm interested in. The other ARPA funds, and I believe Sarah signed on to the call as well. I don't know if you want to promote her, Dave. There were 2 requests from the Youth and Family Services Division that the Select Board approved. One was for the temporary addition for 24 months of an additional clinician to help them try to cut into their backlog. Their caseload is significantly increased. The other was funding over the course of 2 years for a series of outside expert consultation, so that particularly acute cases could be referred to an outside expert. So the staff might stabilize a client who has a major eating disorder issue, and then could refer them to a specialist in that area. Sarah is here, as is Latanya, who is our Director of Aging Services. So I will, I think, stop talking there and turn it back to the committee if they have questions for myself, for Sarah, or for Latanya, the Director of Aging Services.
Thank you, Tim. And Dave, if you want to bring the time in. Oh, I see. Go ahead, Dick.
One of the things that I think this being done is wastewater analysis. Do we do that? And what's it telling us?
So we don't do that. The MWRA has an agreement with a Boston-based company to do sampling through Deer Island treatment. They do both north and south water feeds through the sewer water feeds. So some of your wastewater, some of our wastewater from work is included in that, but it's not anything that Needham is specifically doing.
So that won't give us any insights about, because it's presumably it mixed up with everyone else's water, so they can't
I don't think you can glean any particular insights
Yeah.
about Needham. I think Needham is, relatively representative of the area, so that, if cases are going up in the area, cases will probably be going up
Yeah.
in Needham. Whether they go up the exact same rate, I think is an open question. But yeah, we don't have the fine grain detail on wastewater specifically for the community.
There's no, let's be clear, no one is looking at wastewater per community.
Correct.
They're looking at the final
Yes.
outflow. That's it. So
Dick, did you have other questions?
No, I have exhausted my understanding of wastewater.
If I can just jump in.
well, we have Louise here who used to work for the wastewater company.
Might be proprietary. I hadn't seen it before Tim mentioned it, that he had emailed me around 7:30. I did just forward the document to you guys as well. It's in your email if you have. It's a list of the grants and ARPA monies. The total is about just under $1.2 million. And there's several line items explaining how the monies are being used. And I apologize for getting this so late, but
Thanks for sending that, Tom.
sorry, Josh.
No, thank you for sending that. I guess I did have a question, I guess related to the mental health services and how how does your department interact with the school department? Because I understand that, it's youth and family services. These are all young kids. I imagine you get a lot of referrals from the schools. Could you just describe that type of relationship?
Sure. So I have meetings with the director of guidance and counseling every other week. So we talk about any trends that are occurring in the schools, any specific cases that we need to be aware of, and any kind of collaboration we need to have on any specific family or kind of classes, grade levels, things like that. And then we've also recently joined a mental health initiative that's run by Mary Lammy. And that meeting is occurring on a monthly basis at this point. And that's really just trying to prep for what the future will look like in terms of support in the schools and in the town and how we can partner on that.
Okay. Do you currently offer support within the schools?
Yeah, we do counseling. We do counseling in our office, virtually, in the community, in homes, and in schools. So we have a very collaborative relationship with all the guidance department. So they'll usually send us referrals and we'll talk to them about priority cases that we need to have based on acuity. So our relationship with them is ongoing and pretty fluid.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions? There's a lot going on in the department. I know COVID has really kind of soaked up a lot of the attention. I guess, is there anything, Tim, that because of COVID you've been able to devote fewer resources to over the past year or two?
So I think all of our responsibilities, all of our requirements, statutory obligations have been fulfilled. And I'm specifically focusing on public health, but the same holds true in aging and youth. Things like public health accreditation, things like, positive public health messaging around, healthy eating and body image or things like that, things that are kind of maybe what we think of as sort of core public health functions. Those have been delayed or have had fewer resources dedicated to them, just because there are only so many people in the public health division. And when most of them are spending a lot of their time on COVID, there's only a handful left to do the other activities. So public health accreditation has been moving at a slower pace than previously we had hoped. Development of policies and procedures is still proceeding, but again, instead of developing or formalizing 2 policies a month, we're doing 1 policy every 2 months type of thing.
Okay. Barry, did you have a question?
I was just gonna have Tim look into his crystal ball and tell us what 3 months from now, what do you see processes you guys will still be doing, or do you think do you anticipate getting back to, I don't know, were we ever going to get back to a more, the way things were a few years ago for your departments in particular, not maybe youth and family services certainly, but in terms of the health department?
Sure. I think I'll preface this with, I remember during the very beginning of COVID, Karis asked me, how long I thought the shutdown would be because she was having work planned for her house. And I said, I think it was only going to be like 2 or 3 weeks tops. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Take anything I say with a grain of salt. When you think of how significant cases have gone up, and when you look at the case rates in Massachusetts, it's important to know those are laboratory confirmed cases. So those don't include at-home antigen tests. And given the challenges accessing testing, there's a very significant portion of the population who doesn't have access to PCR testing and is using rapid antigen. So the case rates we're talking about right now are only a portion of the total cases that exist in the community. Because Omicron is spiking so high, the number of people that are vaccinated and boosted or will have contracted Omicron and have some immune resistance, not necessarily durable immune resistance, but some immune resistance will be incredibly high. So the risk in, say, 3 or 4 weeks of going into a room with 20 people will be a lot less than the risk is now. So now if you went into a room with 20 people with the case rates we have right now, there's a 80 to 90% chance someone has COVID in that room. In 4 weeks, the chance is probably down to 5 to 10% of those 20 people will have COVID. I think that changes a lot. A lot will depend on if additional variants develop. Omicron is comparatively more mild, and I say comparatively because there are still some folks, especially those in high-risk categories, for whom getting COVID can have serious health consequences. There's still a lot that isn't fully understood about long COVID and sort of the cluster of symptoms that go along with long COVID. The hope is that trend sort of continues and that COVID is not an emergency situation, but a situation that we manage, a chronic condition that we manage that, flares up every year or, maybe twice a year. If you think about, flu is still deadly. 30-something thousand people die of it every year in the United States, or most years. And those are people in high-risk conditions. Those are people in congregate care facilities like nursing homes, long-term care facilities like that. But we don't sort of stop society and influence some of the measures that we've implemented for COVID for flu. There certainly are, things that happen, especially in a very bad flu season. Hospitals are very crowded. There's longer waits in emergency departments. But even a bad flu season doesn't sort of cripple society. So I think the hope is that as COVID evolves, it evolves to a very contagious but not as virulent form of disease. So the hope is, I guess, that next fall everyone's getting their COVID booster shot and hoping to be responsible in their choices, but not necessarily refraining from indoor dining. Say a lot of it has to do with your risk level, though. Like Tom said, I have a 2.5-month-old baby, so I'm incredibly low risk right now. I'm taking, very, very few exposure activities, whereas someone else who's, 23 and, doesn't have a parent or spouse in a high risk category, might be very comfortable going to a concert, going to a theater, indoor dining on a regular basis.
So I would add that today the World Health Organization said that boosters, frankly, may not be recommended for our youth and our teenagers. So I think that was an important development. And I think, frankly, we're still in uncharted territory. From the information I receive from the medical school on a daily basis, that there's just a lot more that we need to know. So I don't pretend to think that on today, we're really going to have a good sense of what's going on 3, 4, or 5 months down the road. Omicron clearly is a less long COVID illness than Delta or any other COVID-19. But you know, that only means that we know what it is as of now, whereas we don't know what the long-term effects could be. So I think we're still in kind of a learning process. And I also think that I saw an article the other day that said, you know, the only potential virus that we've ever really somewhat captivated is smallpox. And so, you know, we still have measles outbreaks. So I think, you know, I think this is here to stay. But as Tim said, it's a question of how severe it is and what type of precautions we need to take. The other thing I would notice is that most of the data that has come out has shown, and I don't pretend to know why this is, but that the majority of people that are contracting and showing up with the Omicron is people under the age of 40. And, you know, people tell me, well, Jim, that's no surprise because they're the ones that are actually living and going out and doing things as opposed to the rest of us who are stuck in our homes. And that could very well be the case. But I just think there's so much unknown about this that, you know, we really don't have a great game plan or roadmap except to just, you know, keep on being as cautious as we can.
Tim, do you have a sense of how many folks in Needham have received their vaccinations? Get a sense?
Sure. So if you give me 1 moment,
It's on the dashboard.
It is on the dashboard. I can, if you want, I can pull up slides, or I can just show you the slide. I can just tell you from our sort of COVID presentation that we're going to give to the Board of Health tomorrow. It is on the dashboard, as Josh noted. Needham is above 95% fully vaccinated, which is the 2 doses, not necessarily getting into boosters, in every age category except 5 to 11-year-olds. So greater than 95% in 12 to 15, 16 to 19, 20 to 29, all the way up to 75 plus. The 5 to 11-year-olds, which is the group that has most recently been made eligible for vaccination, we have 83% fully vaccinated. Needham also has the highest number, at least in the communities that we track, the highest number of individuals that have been boosted. We have 57% of our population has been boosted. Newton, for example, is at 51, Dover's at 56, Brookline's at 36. So Needham has, you know, a very, you know, well-informed, well-educated population, and many of them have gotten vaccinated. I think we, in the public health division, I said we've done, you know, hundreds of thousands of vaccines, 10,000 plus vaccines this year. We're still offering clinics Tuesdays and Fridays. If you had asked us in October, we were struggling to get people with the holidays coming around and Omicron, our clinics filled up really quick. Yesterday, we got 11 people at a clinic that was going to be a 4-hour clinic. So that's not ideal. So I think it really does go in waves in terms of whether there's an interest in getting a booster dose.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim, are those clinics limited to Needham residents or to anybody?
They are not. They're open to anybody. There is some issue with the state website where we only show up in some of the searches. So we're trying to figure out why that is. But no, it's open to everyone. We've vaccinated people from more than 200 cities and towns.
And Tim, I know pharmacies are charging insurance for vaccinations. Is Needham doing that also?
We do that, although if someone, you know, forgets their card or is unwilling to, or, you know, has concerns, then we never refuse anyone. Same thing with our flu shots. So if they're willing to provide it, it's helpful to us. It doesn't cost them anything, or insurance is required to cover it as a preventative health service. So their insurance reimburses us for the vaccine administration fee. But if someone's not willing to, then we just eat the cost because we're not going to deny someone a flu shot or a COVID shot just because they, think we're tracking them with their insurance numbers. And we're definitely tracking.
Sarcasm.
Yes. Sorry. Yes, that's definitely sarcasm, boys.
Any other questions for Tim and his team? Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
Some of us discussed before we went online that one of the pages, at least for some of us in the book, came out misprinted. Could we get that page that summarizes the year-to-year comparative salary and expense costs? Because I find that very useful to look at. And the page we've got in this tab is not particularly good for that.
Yeah,
Page
Dave,
305.
Dave, I think that's 307. I think you can provide that, right? Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Latanya. I know this has been a really hard, not just year, 2 years, really. So we appreciate your hard work.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. Have a good night.
Have a good night. So last committee updates. I just have one thing. So next week, I'm going to put on the agenda a discussion of the school master plan extension that was rolled out at the school committee meeting last night. If anyone has any questions, maybe just think of those. If it's helpful, maybe you could submit them to Louise so that she can aggregate them in advance. Are there any other updates that anyone has?
Gosh,
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead,
have
Jim.
one question. I did read those slides. I have no idea what they're talking about. Okay, I'm an old bastard, I understand it, but I don't, they've got one line going here, one line going here, one color green, one color red. I thought it was a joke. So what I'd love to know is, could we have a very clear and concise and brief presentation of what it is they're trying to do? And then the second is, and I don't believe this was addressed anywhere in the new plan, is what is the financial impact to the town? And is that right?
You're right that was not, well, the bottom line numbers were in there, but in terms of the debt burden, that has not yet been calculated.
Right.
So
at some point, and I know this is a Herculean task. I'm not suggesting it's easy, but at some point, if it's possible, I'd love to see, here's what their recommendation is. Here's what the impact is to the town. That's what I'd love to see. But I thought it was, and maybe I'm the only person, I'm sure I'm the only person, I couldn't make heads or tails out of it.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
go ahead, Rick.
When I saw that too, Jim, I looked at it and said, my God, it's got to be Ugaritic. But last night I attended Doran Whittier's presentation. And it may be useful if they would come to our committee with an abridged version of just talking about the different scenarios. I found it very helpful to understand, because I looked at the yellow and the lines and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about until they opened their mouth and walked you through it. Now the question is, do you agree with all the money and how it's going to work? And if that's a different story, but in terms of having a clear explanation, it may be valuable to have them come in and walk us through it.
So I don't know if Doran Whittier is available to come and explain it, but I did sit in on all of the meetings of the School Master Plan Extension Group. So I'm happy to walk through my understanding of the financial implications as they're presented to the Finance Committee next week. In terms of those projected enrollment charts with the yellow bands, there were several different projections. The purple ones are the most current. So those are the 2021 forecasts by our demographer, or the demographer that we contract with. All the other lines were previous forecasts from 2020. So they were comparing how this most recent forecast compares to prior forecasts. And I think part of the confusion, part of the confusion is that there have been no firm decisions made. So what the extension, what the master plan extension did, as we funded it on, I think, August 18th, what we did is we funded 4 additional studies. And so this presentation that was given last night is an outline of those 4 different scenarios. And then I think the next steps are not just for us to decide, but for the community, for the school committee, for actually everyone, all stakeholders in town to decide. So part of it is going to be understanding whether there's a preference to prioritize Mitchell first or to prioritize Pollard first. The other decisions are, should we commit to submitting to the MSBA for funding for each of the projects involved, or, as some people have expressed, should we try to move forward with funding it all on our own and not waiting for the MSBA in an effort to make the construction go faster and avoid some escalation costs. So there are a lot of different parameters that have not yet been settled yet. So that may be some of the source of the uncertainty.
Gosh, the numbers that are in here, the 391 million, I'll just use that as one I saw. Is that today's dollars? What's that number? What do those numbers represent?
So though that represents the total cost, including a 4.5% escalation per year.
For when those projects would be done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is total cost, and I should say that that's not including any reimbursement from the MSBA. So there are some projects for which we would, there are assumptions that we would participate with the MSBA, but there are no such assumptions for how much the MSBA would reimburse. I think what Dave has done with prior forecasts is he has plugged in those assumptions himself. Dave, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So I think,
Josh, just one request I would have, and maybe it might be unrealistic, but if school committee is going to go off and have public hearings to give them what local families want, then I understood they're going to take that information back and decide if they can eliminate a couple of those options. My request is, when they're in conversations to eliminate different options, can finance committee play a greater role in that entire kind of talk through? So in essence, we're a part of each one of those things that costs an ungodly amount of money. And is that possible?
So I think that is part of what we should be doing next week when we have this discussion. So as you mentioned, the school department is having a community forum on February 8th to discuss these options and to get feedback. But I think next week, one of the things that I would like to discuss is perhaps we should see if Dave is able to provide debt financing forecasts for each of these 4 options before anything is taken off the table, so that we have these for comparison purposes. I think that would be useful. Dave, could I ask, I think I've asked you this before. I know the original debt forecasting, was a heavy lift. It was a big model to be built. But now that it's built and we have the parameters, for instance, the timing and the amount of funding, is it less effort to create forecasts for new scenarios now that the original model has been built?
So it changed the timelines, and I have to rebuild the model because the model is static in terms of fiscal years. I have to change the year that we'd have to stop borrowing based upon the year that design would be done versus construction. But the time consuming is the number of different scenarios that they present. And once they provide that, I can certainly build the models.
So I guess we have the 4 scenarios that they've provided. If I provide you with the timing and funding, assuming, I think as you did in the last forecasts, that there would be a single tranche of funding per project at the very beginning. I think that was the assumption, right? We could make the same assumptions and I could just provide new Excel of that document. I'll try to do that over the next week, and maybe we can get going on those 4 scenarios then.
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And as Dave mentioned, the timing has changed. So initially, there was, so by initially, I mean last year, when we had the original master plan study, there was a plan in the capital plan to fund at least the first feasibility study in May of this year. And I think the school department has requested that that be pushed out a year to May of 2023.
When is Groundhog Day? I think that's when Dave's going to come out of the basement with his new financial scenarios.
I know we're putting a lot on your shoulders, Dave.
Well, Josh, two just comments for now. One is their labeling of options is how Jim started this whole conversation, about as confusing as possible. So I really would recommend that they kind of get themselves out of their wonk thing and option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, and really simplify it, because the way it is right now, it's impossible to understand. And then 2, the one thing I don't want to miss is the operating cost implications of some of these scenarios, particularly if we are to start or to have a 6th elementary school as at least one of these options, or 2 of them suggest, which would, have all kinds of new hires and a new staffing of a new school. And so I think there's going to be some sort of placeholder or something needs to go in here that these are strictly capital costs, and some of them have substantial operating implications that need to be part of the analysis.
You're right. There are funding calculations for the building costs. There are funding calculations for capital improvement until a building is rebuilt. So the maintenance costs for older buildings, that's also built into their projections. But you're right, ongoing operational costs for instance, a 6th elementary school are not.
Yeah, so I think if a scenario, if there are scenarios where there's going to be a 6th school, a school we don't have now, that it's real to do justice to that option, to do justice to people who are, weighing in on that option or not. There should be a placeholder operational cost of what it would cost to outfit a new elementary school from a personnel point of view, and that should be in this option, so we know what that is to fairly consider it against the others.
Yeah, I don't think that's yet available, but I think we should discuss that next week. I agree.
Yeah, as we've seen, the HVAC costs are much more expensive with the new building. The custodial cost we've run into quite a number of times, so it's not even just in the school department budget that things will be hit.
Yeah, benefits everything. You're right. Any other comments?
A quick question. Can I get a clarification on what our schedule is moving forward?
Yes. Louise, do you have that up? I can pull it up too.
We have meetings the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
I don't have it up right now.
Yeah, so hearings, budget hearings next week and the following week. And then budget discussions just for the overall budget, no particular department, until we basically have a draft budget, which is due on February 22nd.
Okay. So it's essentially every Wednesday until we finish.
For now, yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Do we know when we're going to receive the town manager's recommended budget?
Dave, do you know that?
It will likely be the 26th of January.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I hope that wasn't Jim,
Yeah, it
but I
wasn't
heard
Jim.
you.
That was Chief Condon saying, get off the screen, Jim.
A
Second.
second,
I
Perfect.
third that motion.
We'll take a roll call. Rick,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes,
John,
Yes, please.
Barry,
Yes.
Tom,
yes.
Jim,
Yes, sir.
Louise,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Good night, everyone.